Everyone has read all the poems about London and New York and Paris and places like that, but Los Angeles has never been given credit for the number of poems by wonderful poets who have written about it. Poets who live in the city, but also poets who visit the city. Pleasure, sensual pleasure, intellectual pleasure, that's really what the city is about, and that was the lure, of course, especially because of the movie industry. The glamour and, a lot of the artificiality and, a lot of the concern now about image and about how we're giving up a lot of our intellectual freedom to follow what Hollywood wants us to, where they want to take us. It really gives Los Angeles a uniqueness that I was always conscious of. In Culver City, especially when I was growing up there, MGM Studios was the anchor for all the industry in Culver City. Hal Roach Studios was there. It's where Laurel and Hardy did all their films, which I loved so much when I was growing up. I think poets realize that they have there some aspects of contemporary life that you don't find when you read poems by people in New York or San Francisco. For example, I have a chapter on poems about the freeway. And the freeway, which started in Los Angeles, of course now all cities have something like it, but when it came along in the 1950s and then grew in the 1960s, it was one of the aspects of life in Los Angeles that was most fascinating. I mean, you would get in your car. This is when, of course, there were millions fewer cars on the freeway, and especially late at night, you just drive around for an hour or two, just for the thrill of driving. And this is by Eloise Klein Healy, who was until recently the poet laureate of Los Angeles. And she is talking about, I think this is a poem from the 1950s, talking about the pleasure, the kind of mystical pleasure of driving the freeway. It's called This Dark Night Speed. Sometimes I feel about love like driving places at dark night speed with the radio on, doing what that saxophone was barking in the bar. Better yet, better yet, better get in a car. Sometimes I forget simple words like rapture for this animal joy, this sense of being up to speed and merging from a ramp, knowing the driver in the mirror is already adjusting to meet me and wants it to go smooth, wants me to have my turn, not break acceleration or miss a beat. Wants to meet and make a dance of it at such a speed, if you can imagine, at such a speed that eyes tear from the wind, blowing music out the windows. I always believe I could start pacing with somebody on a long highway, playing all the fast songs and looking at the truck stops for that one car, because sometimes I'm lonely, or I need to feel alive, or I just like being on the road in a car, in a marvelous, monstrous killer machine that fills a human body crazy high on landscape flying by the windows. Just a blur, just a shot of speed. I always believe I could get myself in somebody's eyes, wide and interstate steady, just flat out speeding along and scanning the road ahead, wanting to drive like that forever. And if I could keep it up, God, if I could keep that up, I'd go absolutely right straight crazy to heaven. That really captures the ecstasy of speeding, kind of fantasizing that the cars that are speeding along with you contain people just like you who would fall in love with you if they knew you, if you'd stop the car, but you never want to stop the car because the sensation of speed is so thrilling. That is something at the heart of Los Angeles consciousness that you don't find in the poetry of any other place in the country, I think. The only analogy would be the pleasure of surfing, and there's a number of good poems which I have in a chapter about surfing, about living at the beach, about spending the whole day with your friends out in the waves, sitting on the surfboard, waiting for that perfect wave to come in, and then the ecstasy when a big wave comes and you ride it all the way into shore. These moments of ecstasy, which poets have always specialized in, you find again in the poetry of Los Angeles. To have all of that feeling in a city poem, in an urban poem, you had to wait. Everyone had to wait for Los Angeles to develop, to get that interesting mix. And then Hollywood, of course, would be a third example, the ecstasy of going to the movies, of losing yourself in the pleasure of the acting and the cinematic rush, the montage of scenes one after the other. It involves the same sort of rapture, as Eloise Klein Healy calls it, in which you feel lifted out of your ordinary self into some super self, some kind of great mystical self. Plenty of sex, plenty of money, all the elements of good narrative is there, and often the intention is to shock you in bad ways, but shock you in good ways too, to shock you out of your kind of old-fashioned ideas into an acceptance of a certain liberated mentality, liberated maybe in good ways and in bad. I analyzed a couple of poems about Charles Manson and about crime and about corruption and the corruption of Hollywood, the excesses of Hollywood. So all of that turmoil is going on at the same time. You can go to Los Angeles for the leisure and the happy recreation. You can go there to participate in rituals and ceremonies which are destructive and involve drugs of a dangerous kind and so forth. So, yeah, you're always being surprised by what you find there. Yeah, this is a good poem to conclude on. It's by Joy Harjo, who's a Native American poet, and it's titled "The Path to the Milky Way Leads Through Los Angeles." It's a kind of pro-Los Angeles poem of a different kind than the Eloise Klein Healy. She says, "There are strangers above me, below me, and all around me, and we are all strange in this place of recent invention." For a Native American, that is, it would be very recent invention. "This city named for angels appears naked and stripped of anything resembling the shaking of turtle shells, the songs of human voices on a summer night outside Okmulgee. Yet it's perpetually summer here and beautiful. The shimmer of gods is easier to perceive at sunrise or dusk, when those who remember us here in the illusion of the marketplace turn toward the changing of the sun and say our names. We matter to somebody. We must matter to the strange God who imagines us as we revolve together in the dark sky on the path to the Milky Way. We can't easily see that starry road from the perspective of the crossing of boulevards, can't hear it in the whine of civilization or taste the minerals of planets in hamburgers. But we can buy a map here of the stars' homes, dial a tone for dangerous love, choose from several brands of water or a hiss of oxygen for gentle rejuvenation. Everyone knows you can't buy love, but you can sell your soul for less than a song to a stranger who will sell it to someone else for a profit, until you're owned by a company of strangers in the city of the strange and getting stranger. I'd rather understand how to sing from a crow who is never good at singing or much of anything, but finding gold in the trash of humans. So what are we doing here? I asked the crow, parading on the ledge of falling that hangs over this precarious city. Crow just laughs and says, wait and see. And I am waiting and not seeing anything, not just yet. But like Crow, I collect the shine of anything beautiful I can find. Los Angeles poetry is full of poems like that, and there's just subject matter which focuses on imagery of fire. Of course, there's always fires in Los Angeles, and the terror of fire maybe coming down into the city from the foothills or the mountains is always strong there. And, all, fire, water, air, the air either smoggy or that incredibly crystalline air that you get when the wind is blowing the smoke or smog away, and you have that light which everyone agrees is unlike the light anywhere in the world, especially when you get up in the morning and you look outside, and it's just, you really feel like your soul is moving straight up into heaven because it's just so clear, and there's nothing like it. When you put all of that together, and you put it together with the historical circumstances of the way Los Angeles was created. In the midst, it was originally, of course, an Indian, Native American village, and then was kind of taken over by Hispanic military forces coming from Mexico, and then they were thrown out by the pioneers, the white civilization moving across the country to the frontier, and the wonderful complexity of living there amidst every minority group. But I think there's a kind of intuitive understanding of what's going on in the world that settles in Los Angeles because of that mixture.